time to go back to the early 2000s.
What?
A time that was bad.
Yeah?
That's it.
Yep.
2000s, they were bad.
Yep.
That's what we're going back to this week. On the Season Lamb Checkup OVA, a podcast. It's where we have conversations about video games, anime, and manga. Hello, I'm Jared, joined as always by Doc Al and Ladium.
Hello.
This is episode 175!
Dang, we're so old.
It's a lot of episodes.
It's a lot of episodes.
And we're talking about High Score Girl 2.
Mm-hmm.
The sequel to High Score Girl, well, the anime sequel.
Yes.
That finishes out the rest of the story that got adapted. This finally hit Netflix this
Yes, it did.
past weekend, or
On
last
the
weekend, I
ninth.
should say. And you finally got to watch the final 9 episodes.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we're here to discuss.
I marathoned them. I watched them all in one sitting.
That you did. Good
I'm
job.
impressive, aren't I, guys? Nobody's impressed.
The show doesn't take place in the early 2000s, by the way.
No, I know. It's the 90s.
It's the late 90s. A better
Yeah.
time.
Was it?
2000s, worst time.
I agree with you that was the worst time, but I don't know that the late 90s were a good time either.
There was a quote on a recent Giant Bomb video where they said the 2000s were a terrible time for culture, and like that quote has just stuck with me because I'm like, it's so f***ing true.
It's true. It's very true.
God,
Yikes.
terrible.
But anyway, we're going to the 90s.
The 90s. So we're finishing up the final bits of High Score Girl. Got some feelings to figure out,
Mhm.
some
Tournaments to participate
tournaments, some gang warfare,
in. Some new games to play.
some new games to play, some intense rivalries will be decided. All that in 9 episodes. So let's talk about it.
Let's do it.
We talked about the first half of this series, or the first season,
Mm-hmm.
last year
Wow.
on episode 127.
Jeez.
I believe that was when the first season and the OVAs came out. That was when you watched it, so we talked about it then.
Mm-hmm.
Now, nearly a year later, we were talking about the finished product.
It was worth the wait.
Well, there you go. That's it. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. But yeah, obviously you waited for the Netflix release. I have already seen these episodes.
Yeah, but you got
So
like problematic fan translation.
For like half of them, I found different fan translations that were less problematic, thankfully.
That's good.
But yeah, like I watched them when they initially came out in Japanese. So it has been a little bit since I have seen these episodes, but you obviously marathon through the entirety of it, I think all in one day
Friday night.
when it came out. So
Yep.
yeah. Let's talk about High Score Girl 2.
Let's do it.
9 episodes. The first episode kind of is a little bit of like a bridge between the first season and second season.
Mhm.
Not a whole lot happens.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of like a catch up, but also like, oh, by the way, we're not like in the exact same time period as we were.
Mhm.
Things have progressed.
They've gotten older. Things are there. I think the key thing from this episode is that like Haru eventually goes home at one point, and like everyone's in his room, and he's just like, this is the most awkward situation I've ever been in.
Yep.
How do I handle this?
Poor dude.
I don't know. Because he meets up with his one friend. What's his face? Meow.
Meow.
They run into the Hidaka, and then they just go home to his house, while at the same time, Ono and her sister are at his house as well.
Mm-hmm.
And like he comes in, he's like, "Oh God."
Yeah, it's funny because Meow is like, oh, I'm going to tell you about the birds and the bees. I'm gonna give you these talks. And then like for some reason, like invites what's her face? Ah, jeez, why am I blanking on her name? Blonde.
Hidaka,
Hidaka.
or
Uh
Koharu as you would know her.
yeah. He just like invites her to this birds and bees talk, and I'm like, why? Why are we doing this? Is that really a thing that you want to do? But he does. And then everything kind of breaks into hell when he realizes that like, oh god, everyone is here.
It's like the whole time he's just like, I don't know what to do. Do we play games? I don't know. Is everyone just gonna stay here? Sit here? I don't know what's going on. Eventually, he's just like, um, I think this leads into like the next episode, but like eventually he's like, why don't we play some games? And he's like, I got Virtua Fighter 2. And like Ono and Hidaka are like, all right, we're gonna play.
Yeah.
And Ono like handicaps herself by playing with the pad, and and Hidaka, excuse me, uses the fight stick.
Yes.
So immediately it's like, oh god, this is an interesting encounter, but who's going to pick up this first victory between these two? Spoilers, it's Ono.
Yeah, it's Ono.
Big pad player. That eventually leads them into like their own mini rivalry, which has been basically brewing at this point the whole time. So yeah, that happens. Eventually, like, Haru like has like a weird spot where like he's like playing in his arcades, but, like he has to like leave and go to Shibuya at one point.
Yeah.
And like check out these other arcades, and runs into this local regional group that represents Shibuya and like arcade fighting and all that sort of stuff, and like falls in with them. Yeah, like because they're watching a specific game that's like very difficult, and he goes in and like beats the final boss, and they're like, oh my god, I can't believe you did this. We've never seen anyone beat this boss before. How did you do this and everything? He's just like, I just did.
Which he actually figured it out because he had watched Ono at one point play through it, and she had almost done it with this one technique, but like barely failed. So he's like, all right, I'm gonna give it a shot. I'm gonna give it a shot. I'm gonna use your technique, and he did, and he won. Everyone was like, woo.
So essentially, like this group just like propels him up, and like just like hey, you're gonna hang out with us now. He's like, okay, I guess. Which eventually leads to like all his friends coming to Shibuya and be like, why are you now like a hoodlum in Shibuya? And he's like, I'm not a hoodlum.
He's like dressing weird.
Yeah, I'm just hanging out with these people. They're all very nice.
It's so weird. And like we have the like 90s Japanese schoolgirls at one point with like the blue socks, which is funny.
Mm-hmm. They're all like fawning over him and everything. At one point he's like talking about like all the people he's met, and he's like, oh, this one guy who likes Puzzle Bobble too, like he's pretty cool. And like, and they was like, how do you know these guys are like actually really nice and cool? Like, anybody who loves Puzzle Bobble is nice.
Yep.
That's it. So that's happening. In the meantime, Hidaka has like gotten in with like another regional group from where they're from, called the Mizuno Kuchi, and she's been recruited from like their leader. And eventually they're like, hey, we're gonna go take on the people from Shibuya. Oh, by the way, Haru is also in Shibuya representing them. And she's like, oh my gosh, I have to fight them. What's going to happen? So that leads into like a big, huge showdown between these two regional groups. Gang warfare.
Yep. In the arcade.
Mm-hmm.
And this scene, I don't know if it was done the same way in the Japanese version, but the way that they did in the English version was interesting, in my opinion, because of what actually fuels her. Because I'm sure you were going to explain. Basically, she like goes up first or volunteers herself to fight first.
Mhm.
And then just wrecks everybody. But what fuels her is that like one of those Japanese schoolgirls is over there like talking about how like amazing he is and how hot he is, and she's just like,
Mhm.
oh no. And like at one point she's like, oh man, I'd really like to take his virginity. I'm like, excuse me,
Mhm.
what?
Yeah, that is the thing.
What? What? And so she just like rages because of this, and
Mhm.
I'm like, oh, okay.
So yeah, that happens.
Yep.
Eventually it leads to her and Haru having to face off. I don't quite remember who wins between those two.
She does.
Okay. Um, so basically that leads to her group winning, and she basically afterwards just like steals Haru and like has him lead her around like Shibuya and everything, acting real weird the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
So like they go to like a different arcade and play some games, and she's just like acting essentially like flirtatious, but like with malicious intent. Is a weird way to describe it. Or like she's just like very like dry about like what she's saying and very blunt about it in a way that like is different than what she had been acting previously. So like I guess like throughout the rest of the series, she's just like, I'm going to get my feelings across to you no matter what. This is it. And the entire time Haru's like, okay.
Yeah, so this part really upset me.
Mm-hmm.
Um it is very manipulative,
Yes.
and it's very clear that he's not okay with it.
Mm-hmm.
And so like the whole time that she was doing this, I was just like, like she wants to go to like a hotel with him at one point, and he's like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, to sleep, right? um and she keeps doing this like back and forth of like, initially she's like, yes, I just wanted to sleep, why wouldn't you just let me sleep? And then she's like, no, that's not all I wanted to do with you, I wanted to do a lot more. And I'm like, oh my god, what are you doing?
I think it's a combination of like he is uncomfortable with how she's acting because she's never acted like this before in front of him.
Yep.
Along with the fact that like he has no clue what to do in this sort of situation because he has no experience at all with like what's happening.
Yeah.
And also on her end, it's like she is frantically losing basically what she feels like is like interest or his interest in her
Mm-hmm.
because she realizes like, oh, he has feelings for Ono and everything. That's eventually the road that he's going to go down. Like this is my last vested
My last
grasp
chance,
at
really.
my last chance really to like go and try and get him. And like I'm freaking out about it and doing like very weird things about it as well.
I did not like it. It made me really, really uncomfortable.
I think that's the point.
I know, it succeeded. It made me very,
Yeah,
very uncomfortable.
it's supposed to make you feel uncomfortable because everyone in that situation is uncomfortable.
Yeah. Including Ono, who shows up.
Yeah. So Ono like eventually like hears about Haro being a hoodlum and is like, I'm gonna go get him and bring him back because he's being an idiot. So like she's like searching around. Eventually she stumbles into the arcade where they had the battle and everything and hears those girls talking about him. And they're like, oh, I can't believe Hidaka was his girlfriend the whole time.
Yep.
I think this is where the part where they're like, oh, I wanted to get his virginity. And Ono hears this and is like, I'm unhappy.
Yeah.
Is still unable to find them, but eventually, like, later on, Hidaka has this, like, very, like, emotional confession to Haru and, like, hugs him. And he's just like, the whole time. And that's where Ono finds them. And it's just like, uh-oh.
Yep.
That leads into the next set of episodes where eventually he's brought back and is like fine again. He's no longer a hoodlum.
No longer a hoodlum wearing his weird outfits.
Yes, no longer wearing his weird outfits. Ono's sister eventually like comes by and is like, hey, how do you feel about these girls? And he's like, gotta go. Bye-bye.
She becomes a much more important character in season 2 than she was in 1.
Mm-hmm.
Which I was so upset because I was like, that's Christina V. And then I went to behind the voice actors. It's like, this is not Christina V. I'm like, what? It's Christina V. And then I went on Wikipedia. It's like, oh, by the way, that's Christina V. I'm like, you lied to me. I knew it. Shouldn't question myself on these things.
You read the credits in the end.
They're all in Japanese.
Well, crap. So yeah, Haru eventually is like got to figure out all this stuff. He gets abducted by men in suits, the men in black.
Yeah, he does. They put a bag over his head, throw him into a car.
And eventually it's Ono who sent for them.
Mm.
Spend
the night.
Yeah, I think at some point you see like the awkwardness of all three of them coming back from Shibuya.
Yeah.
And it's just like them just sitting on a train and being like,
And he finds out from her sister that like Ono stayed out like all night looking for him, which, oh.
So she brings him to her house and like doesn't tell him exactly what's going on. He's like freaking out, like what is going on? Am I gonna get beat up or something? At one point she infers that like her teacher's going to like come and like punish him. He freaks out. He's like, oh god. He runs into like their butler who like has like a bag with him. He's like, the teacher's gonna punish me. That's what she said. He's like, no, she's just kidding. She's just goofing on you. And she just like point back to Ono and she's just like,
She's got this like little tiny smile on her face.
Yep. He brings them like a Super Famicom and like all of the Super Famicom versions of Final Fight, and that's what they hang out and play because like that was like one of the first games they played together cooperatively.
Yep. So, they play them backwards.
Yeah. Ono basically is like, well, you went out and hung out with her by your lonesome. We're gonna hang out together because this is war now.
Yep.
War.
So at one point, which this comes a little bit later, but the sister is like, oh yeah, so now they're both at 1 point each.
Mm-hmm.
Because this was her point.
Yes. I think at one point they're playing Final Fight Guy or Final Fight 2, and Haru was like, I'm gonna pick this the lady character, and he just like starts punching him. He's like, what do you mean? Why can't I do this?
Yeah. He's like, yeah, she's kind of hot. I'll pick her. And she's like, and
she's like, I'll pick her. And she goes pick her. And Haru's like, is this weird? You're cheating on Mike Hagar by doing this.
Which was funny.
And then eventually they play Final Fight Guy, which is a single player game. So he just plays through it while she watches. And then she passes out and he goes to leave and talks with like the butler and everything. And he's like, why did you guys like kidnap me? And he's like, oh, that was just part of her little dark humor.
Yep.
It was a goof. So he gets to go home. He's not kidnapped for reals.
Only not for reals.
Only not for reals. The next episode sees a big showdown.
Yeah, it does.
Koharu Hidaka is basically just like working at her family's little store. She sees Ono is like around and it's like, oh god, she's coming to beat me up. She's gonna come beat me up. Oh no, what's happening? She's like playing like on one of the arcade cabinets in front of like the store, and like she just keeps imagining that like, oh, she's this character from this game, this character from this game.
Yep.
Eventually like her mom comes down and is like, oh, you can go hang out with your friend. Ono leads her to the arcade where they do like a bunch of like kind of assorted little claw machines and like that sort of thing for a while, and then eventually Hidaka's like, we didn't come here just to do this, did we? We came here to have a final showdown, right?
We each have 1 point.
We each have 1 point. So Hidaka is like, I gotta find a game that I can play that like I can have a chance of beating her in. And she's like looking around like, oh, I could play Street Fighter Alpha 2, but I haven't gotten that far in it. We could play Mortal Kombat, but I don't know like the combos and anything. Eventually they settle on Super Street Fighter 2 X. Mm-hmm. X is gonna give it to you.
God.
And this is going to be the big showdown between them two. Hidaka is like, oh, I need some way to to beat her because I know she's incredibly good at this game. So she gets the power of Akuma. And she's like, basically her ideology behind this is like, if I'm going to beat her, I have to become a demon myself.
Mm-hmm. Which the funny part is that like the first round she goes to do it and she actually picks like brown Ryu.
Yeah, she fails the input, and then Ono also tries it and fails as well.
Yep, and they're like, this one doesn't count.
Well, this is practice round. So eventually she gets it, and then Ono counters by picking Zangief, which they go into like a meta chart of like matchups, and it's like, oh, Akuma versus Zangief is like a terrible matchup for Zangief. Like, he is terrible against Akuma.
It's like a 0-10 matchup.
Yeah. So essentially, Hidaka is like, all right, well, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it in any way. If I'm going to win, I'm going to win by any means necessary. And if that means doing the cheapest strategies available, I will do that.
Oh, this made me so mad.
Like, I don't care at this point. So she's able to like get a time. She's able to timer scammer in the first round, and it's just like, yes, this is working. Everything's fine. And then she keeps trying to go through it in the second round, but like eventually she's just like, this doesn't feel good. Like, I'm winning, but like something feels wrong about this. Like, is it just like, do I feel like I'm just like being cheap by doing this or what? And like that brief that brief flutterance in her heart is enough to like give Ono the opening that she needs, and then like she's able to close the distance, get in, and like finish her off for the second round.
So they each have one. So
they go into the third round tied, and basically Hidaka like abandons her cheap strategy and is like, I'm gonna fight her head on
for real,
and we're gonna figure out whose feelings are more real through this fight.
But we don't actually find out the result of this fight.
We do not find out the result of this fight until the very last episode.
Yep. We just know that it happened.
We know it happened, and the third round was intense and very dramatic.
Yes.
Because there was a lot of back and forth action.
And they're both really good.
Yes.
Even if one was being cheap.
Gotta do what you gotta do.
Man, I don't know. You don't ever pull the cheap game like that.
If it's in the realm of the game.
You have to admit you'd be real mad if somebody did that to you.
I mean, sure, but like, it's not like it's cheating.
It's not cheating. It's just bad sportsmanship.
It's uncouth.
Bad sportsmanship.
The following episode, Haru figures out he likes Ono.
Yeah, he does. Finally.
And Meow's like, oh my god, you figured it out. Oh. This is amazing.
Is this also the part where he figures out that the sister's like, yeah, if you want to get your license, you can have the bike?
I think so. Yeah. It would have to be because the rest of the episodes are them in Osaka. So, like, yeah, he goes off and figures out how he's going to get he starts studying for his
scooter license.
Motorcycle license, yeah. And it's a lot of him just being like, oh, I gotta get out this game stuff out of my mind. I gotta go buy these Virtua Fighter 2 character discs.
God.
He buys one and it's like, he's like, oh, I just like this music. This is really nice to study to. And like his mom comes in and is like, is this the kind of thing you're into? And he's like, no. Yeah,
because it's got like super muscular dude on there.
Yeah.
Like flexing and all. I couldn't actually watch all that part.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, but
but it's still ridiculous. So yeah, he goes and does like all that. He takes the test and everything, passes it, and is like, yeah, I did it. Also, at one point, he's like training by like playing a motorcycle game. They're like, you can't. This is not a good way to train. You can't go speeding and racing the other drivers. Don't go try and pick power ups
like that.
Don't try and pick up power ups on the road. Eventually he gets his license and everything and goes out on his first ride and goes to see Ono. He's like, hey, look at me, I got a motorcycle, I got a scooter, your sister gave it to me
out, let me know.
He says that, and like she has like this pained look on her face, and he's like very confused about why.
He's like, oh no,
drama
llama.
Also, he's like, hey, you want to go do a tournament in Osaka? Let's do that. That leads us to the final 3 episodes. Just a lot of drama.
A lot of drama.
We learn early on that Ono is going to be moving to Los Angeles to meet up with her parents and leaving Japan.
Yep.
And her sister didn't know it was happening so soon because she's like she pushes Haru to be like, you have to win this tournament and confess to her. Like, that's the only way you can do this because it's you. And like, she hears about it from like the butler and is like super upset because she's like, I pushed him to do this and now like there's no, like, she's not going to be here. And it's all my fault for doing this, for basically turning my back on the family to begin with and putting her in this position. And if it wasn't for me, like, she wouldn't have to do this. She wouldn't have to leave. All this sort of stuff.
It's sad.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the first like time we actually see her serious about anything. Because for the most part, this character is like very goofy throughout and like just constantly making jokes or not taking anything seriously. This is the first time you see her actually be serious about something. It's pretty intense. She's very upset about it. Yep. Understandably.
But again, Haru doesn't know about it. They're keeping that a secret. But they still, him and Ono go to Osaka for a Street Fighter 2 tournament.
Oh, actually, hold up. Before we go to Osaka, I want to highlight this one scene that was really funny that like literally everybody was like talking about how in love he was. And he's just like, no, like, I like her. And they're like, you're in love. And he's like, no, like, I like her. Why is everybody in my room? It was great.
Everyone get out of my room.
I'm not in love. It's not love.
God.
Oh, and there's that one dude who sparkles all the time.
Yeah.
I really like him. He's an but he sparkles.
He is, but he sparkles. So yeah, they head to Osaka. They do a little sightseeing around and find a bee statue before going around and checking out a bunch of different arcades that are in Osaka and just hang out and do that because that's what you would do.
Including
and he's like, oh, this is so nice.
Cheap one.
The cheap one where you get to play for 10 yen, but the difficulty is jacked up on the machine.
Yeah, and you can't play after 11 if you're a minor. So they sneak out.
They played the Die Hard game.
Yeah.
Which is really great as well because in the manga there is drawn recreations of the cutscenes in that game and it's fantastic.
Oh my god, that's amazing.
Oh man, but yeah, they play some of that and then eventually the cops are like, "Get out of here, you kids!"
There was one point where he like got a little miffed because he kept losing. He's like, "I want to go play this game," and she like gets sad because she's like, "Oh, he's gonna go play that." And he's like, "You know, it's 2-player, right?" And she's like,
So they go have their fun day, and then eventually they come back to the hotel, where they have separate rooms.
Yep.
But the walls are very thin, so he hears her like snacking. He's like, "Oh, you snacking over there?" When she's like smacks the wall back at him.
You got some chips.
The whole time he's just like very like, "Oh God, what do I do? Should I go over
her.
there and hang out with her? Do I do anything?
My TV doesn't work.
My TV doesn't work. I'm very bored. Can't sleep."
Yeah.
Eventually,
check for ghosts.
Yeah, check for ghosts. And like he hears like a glass shatter. He's like, "Oh crap, I should go over there." She found like a talisman in one of the framed photos. He's like, "Oh, I didn't realize that was actually going to be a thing. I was just goofing on you."
He's like, "Oh, they're really not going to be happy that this glass broke."
Nope. And eventually he's like, oh, "Okay, I guess I can sleep in your room if you want. We can switch rooms." And he's like, "No."
No, she doesn't actually say it, but
she's like holds onto his shirt.
Yep.
And he's like, "No."
So they stay in his room.
Yep. Spend the night together.
I was texting you during this point, basically like the equivalent of me screeching. Because like they're holding hands. They're holding the hands. And then very quickly after that, it's like she bit him.
She gave him the chomp.
Yeah, she like keeps harassing him because like they hold hands at one point. She bites him. She tickles him. She steals the blankets from him. But they did hold hands. It was cute.
The whole time he's like, "We're not gonna sleep. We're gonna be so tired in the morning.
We're gonna do terribly."
Chomp.
Chomp.
Loki? Yeah. Loki chomp.
Loki chomp.
Chomp chomp. That leads you into the next episode where
Tournament.
It's time for the tournament. So yeah, it's a big tournament. They are excitedly preparing to face each other at some point. Mm-hmm. They're like sitting on the ground, like waiting before like the whole thing starts, and like he's like, "Oh God, I did not sleep that much. I'm so tired." And she's like making a tired expression. He's like, "You slept very well. Why are you doing that?"
You got all the blanket.
But eventually the tournament starts, and he's like, "All right, we'll meet in the finals. I'll see you in the finals." He gets through his like block very easily. You see some like recurring characters from the first season show back up.
The Ryu cosplayer.
Yeah.
He's like, "I am the best," and loses immediately.
Gets disposed of.
Yeah.
He gets through his block pretty okay. He's like, "All right, well, I got through that. Let me see where she ended up." And he looks up and like, "Oh, she got knocked out in the first round."
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, "What the heck happened?" Like this whole thing was for us to eventually meet up and have our big fight that we've been waiting for, and now like it's not gonna happen. Like, what's going on? And they do like a good thing here of like you get to see like Ono's conscience of Zangief basically come after her.
Yeah.
And like it's like, what are you doing? Why you've been very wavering this whole time? Is like, because obviously you're under so much pressure. You know, you're leaving soon and all this. This is maybe the last time you get to hang out with Haru in this kind of capacity for a good while. Like, obviously this is what's causing you to play like this. But is this what you really wanted? Is this why you came here? And eventually, like, she gets like the fire back in her and is like, gets the determination. Yes. And like I think at one point like he like they walk past each other and he like sees like, oh, she's getting serious.
Yeah.
And eventually she just like she blows through losers bracket to meet up with him in the semifinals.
Mm-hmm.
And the crowd's like, oh, this is the two that fought in the finals 2 years ago. Oh. There's a very good panel in the manga where like they face off, they do the fist bump, which is really good.
Yeah.
But like they have like a close up on her face, and like the way they like just the artist drew her eyes specifically, you can just see like the fire and determination in her eyes specifically, which is something you don't really ever see in her character.
Mm-hmm.
Considering how like just like
stoic she is.
Like you see like she is determined. She is ready for this. And like it's such a fantastic touch because like it's a small, simple detail, but it gets across so much.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, they have their showdown.
They do.
It is their classic matchup of Zangief versus Guile, because that is their mains. Ono takes the first round,
and also their conscious
yes.
voice.
Yeah, that too. Haru was able to fight back and win the second round, and it all comes down to the final round, where they throw their basically their everything into this one round. Like this is do or die. This is the culmination of their years of rivalry, of friendship, of romance, and all that sort of stuff. It's all boiling to this specific moment. And basically, like, it comes down to, like, one hit between the two. Whoever gets the final hit wins the match. And that leads us to the series finale.
One thing that I want to say before we go to the finale is that there is one part, at least in the English dub, apparently the subtitles are a little bit different, so it might have been different in the Japanese dub. But as I just mentioned, like Guile is like the main, but also like the voice of reason in his head and all that.
Yeah.
And so there was one point where he's like, go home and be a family man. And I'm just like,
good.
oh my God, that's perfect. I was so happy about that. Like, I legitimately had to pause it and like die laughing. And I had to send it to you because it's like, that's amazing.
It's a very good touch.
So good. So, so good. Also, like, the reason that he knew there was an issue in the hotel was that, like, another Guile showed up.
Shadow Guile.
Shadow Guile, yeah.
And then eventually that Guile turns into Sakura. It does in the manga. I don't know what it does in the show, but
yeah, I didn't do it in the show.
Eventually, like that version of Guile transforms into Sakura is basically like to represent Ono.
Oh, huh. That's interesting.
Like but you're not fighting against yourself anymore. You're fighting against Ono, who you cherish and care for.
That's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I just had to mention that go home and be a family man line because that was just
really good.
A+ touch.
Really
anyway,
good.
The finale.
So the finale basically opens up and it's like a few months after the fact. Haru was out with his friends. Like, oh, you want to go to the arcade? There's a new game coming out. And he's like, nah, I'm not really feeling it. I think I'm just gonna head home.
Yeah, I was like, you haven't been feeling it for months, man.
Yeah, we learned that Haru
the Sparkle
lost.
Man. Yeah, the Sparkle Man lost his sparkle because he stopped using the same kind of like hair stuff.
Yeah.
So like he had a purple sparkle the whole time. Now he's got a white sparkle.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, yeah, Haru lost.
And like he's just like spiraling downward because he just can't get over it. He basically failed in what he did. And then he learns after the fact that like, oh, Ono's leaving.
So he couldn't confess his feelings in the way he wanted to.
And he's like, well, this is pointless now. What do I do?
Kind of like throws himself into his part-time job.
Yeah, everyone picks up on it. It's like, we got to do something to get him out of this funk.
Buddy, you okay?
Yeah. And essentially this all starts leading closer and closer to when Ono's supposed to leave. At one point before she leaves, like the day before she leaves, her sister comes and is like tries to like just talk him out of his funk and everything, his depression, and is like, what are you doing? Like, you're not even playing games, you're reading manga? You haven't bought any games? Who are you? What is wrong with you? So she like just tries to cheer him up and like kind of get him back to who he was, but like it doesn't really work. And then also she gives him a gift from Ono, which is the ring that he gave her initially. That
she's been wearing it as a necklace the whole time.
Mm-hmm. And he like takes that as a sign like, oh well, it's over.
Yeah.
I screwed up. I messed up. That's it.
She's returning this.
Mm-hmm.
Which it should be said, this is like a capsule machine.
Yeah.
Basically. But
like, it has so much like significance.
It has a lot of sentimental value, and she's worn it for years at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And she returned it. So he's like, well, he didn't say that, but I did.
He basically kind of like says that, but not saying it.
Yeah.
That leads us to the day when Ono's leaving. He's just like still sulking in his room, and his mom's like, you realize today's the day she's leaving. You have to go see her off. And he's just like, I'm just not really, I don't think I'm going to.
Nope.
Not really feeling it. And his mom's like, ah!
I didn't raise you like this.
What are you doing? He eventually like leaves and like goes off on a walk and just like meandering around, runs into Hidaka, who's like cut your hair because of significant life events.
Yes. Just getting a new start.
Yep. And she's like, today's the day Ono's leaving, right? And he's like, yeah. And he's like, why aren't you there? He's just like, it's over. It's not gonna, nothing matters. She returned the ring and everything. I can't do anything. She also like talks about like, cause like, oh, like they have like a talk about her feelings, and he's like, yeah, I understand your feelings, but like, I like her instead. That's just the way it is. And then like, I think that goes into like he talks about her returning the ring, and she's like, "You're a idiot."
Yeah.
What do you mean you thought that's how this is it? No, she's like saying, "Hey, come get me, you moron."
You absolute idiot.
And he's like, "Oh, I didn't see it like that. Oh." Oh, huh. Well, I should probably go then.
Which she does explain the outcome of the fight.
Yes, this is the outcome of the fight where she's like, "Yeah, I was the one who won." Because we had this knockdown drag out fight, and it was basically my feelings against hers, but like I won that battle, but essentially I felt like I lost the war because her feelings were so much more unwavering compared to mine.
But it made her feel okay of like knowing that somebody like cared that much about him.
Mm-hmm.
So she wasn't happy about it, but she accepted it. But yeah, so he's like, "Oh, I have to go." So he runs back and gets his bike, his scooter.
Yeah, he runs home, gets like his scooter ready. He's like, "Mom, where's my helmet?" And she's like, just chucks it at him, and she's like, "About time you came back."
Go.
And he like rushes off and like he speeds through like all the streets and everything. You see like he's like, "Oh God, I'm not gonna make it. I'm not gonna make it." But like all these like various characters from various games show up and like block traffic here and there,
turn the lights green.
Easier for like him to get to where he needs to go. And all the while is like intercut with like Ono getting on the plane, taking off and everything. He's like, "Oh, it's already evening. I'm not gonna make it in time. She's already gonna be gone." But eventually he makes it to the airport and like literally it's like it tries to Akira slide but crashes instead.
Yeah. And Guile at one point like says something and there's like this giant weird like cloud opening.
Mm-hmm.
I forget exactly what he said that made that happen, but something happened.
So like he like shows up and he's like all battered. Like people end up in front of the airport like, "Oh, that was a terrible crash. Are you okay?" He's like, "I gotta go."
Goodbye.
He runs into the butler, Ono's sister, and her teacher, and it's like, "Where is she? Did she already leave?" And it's like, "Oh no, she already left." But as it turns out, like there was something wrong with the plane, so they're turning back.
Which is whatever happened with the Sky and Guile that made that happen.
And like immediately after that, you see her show up, and he just like throws his helmet out and just like runs at her.
Yep.
And like picks her up and hugs her.
It's so cute. She cries.
Mm-hmm. And he's like basically like, "Oh, never gonna let you be alone again. I'll always be by your side. I'll figure out a way to come see you.
I'll get a passport.
Get a passport and everything. And also like the next time I see you, I'll find a different ring and give it to you.
Gonna make you my wife." But he does give her the pink ring back.
Borat voice, "My wife." That's how the series ends.
It was cute.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't sure how it was going to end.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't expecting the whole like gotta go to America plot line.
The twist.
I did assume these two would get together, and I was really rooting for it.
Mm-hmm.
So there were lots of cute moments towards the end there. That was like, especially with the like little plastic ring in the airport. That was really cute.
Mm-hmm.
And the holding hands, as you know, with me texting you. But yeah, I just did not know how it was gonna go. I liked it a lot. I liked it a whole lot.
Yeah.
Except for the shark. Stop putting sharks in things.
Virtua Fighter 2 character disc.
Please stop putting sharks in things, people. It's the worst. But you did warn me, so it was fine.
Yeah.
I survived.
You did.
I didn't see a single shark.
There you go. You were not amazed by the power of the Sega Saturn.
I was not. I'm sorry. It is one of the cool things about the series is just how well they implement like all the games like as they're coming out, and also like which ones are prominent at one point, and like what people would be caring about, and the new releases, which I already said, but it's like super cool how that's all incorporated. It makes it feel like more of a real story than like if they were just playing the same game over and over and over.
It effectively makes it like a period piece.
It does. It is a period piece. Period.
Which is a funky thing to think of an anime as.
Yeah, I mean it is an anime period piece about video games and love.
Mm-hmm.
Cute.
And I think like we said this before, like in the original episode, but like I don't know how much this show and the manga itself would work if they did not go out and like get the licenses for all of these games.
It wouldn't have worked.
Yeah.
I don't think it would have worked. Especially, like, I appreciate it so much that they have Guile and Zangief, like, driving their decisions this whole time. Like, that's really, really well done and really clever. And I don't know that, like, if it had just been, like, an internal monologue or something, that it would have been the same. Or if they had done a knockoff version of them.
Yeah.
It just would have felt weird. But I really like what they did here.
Mm-hmm.
It's fun. It makes me wonder though, like, how did they get all the videos of like people playing these games the way that they want them to? Like,
that's a good question.
I
would assume they
footage.
just like I would assume they just brought people in that like they knew like
we're good at it.
Fighting game pros or something like that, and be like, hey, we need you in this situation to do these specific moves and everything to like kind of like act it out essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Or I wonder like so they could have done that, or maybe done something like use like a tool assisted kind of thing, like how they do tool assisted speedruns.
Yeah,
where they basically just map out the exact inputs that they need.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that would probably be the easier way to do this, and compared to like getting actual people to be like, hey, we need you to do these specific moves in this specific way.
Yeah.
Because if you're doing a tool system version, like you can at least you have full control for like what's happening on both sides essentially. So I feel like that would probably be the easier way to do it. But like I've never heard one way or the other how they actually did that. I think that would be a really fascinating thing to like to see like the way they did all of
the
methodology behind getting all the video capture and everything. So
yeah, because a lot of what they pull off is really difficult to do.
Yeah, it's all high level play.
Yeah, like in all the games.
Mm-hmm.
So like it would have been really, really cool to know how they pulled that off, because I was like, these are like actual, like that's gameplay footage. That's not just like animated stuff. Like they actually put the game in there. So I was trying to figure out like, how did they pull this off?
Yeah, that'd be really interesting to see.
I would love to know. I might not ever know, but I would love to know.
Yeah. But yeah, that does it for High Score Girl.
I liked it a lot. I really, really liked it. I had a lot of fun with it. I feel like this is very. I probably target audience for this, but I feel very target audience for this because I'm like, holy crap, this is like video game history and also cute romance.
I mean, yeah.
I love it.
I mean, considering the time period and everything, like it's pretty much like aiming for a specific audience.
Yeah.
Of like, hey, people who grew up with these games specifically, and also like this genre. So, but it pulls it off incredibly well.
Yeah, it really does, and I do appreciate that the main love interest is like a gremlin.
It's true.
She is.
You're not wrong.
I love her.
There is a sequel manga out.
Yeah.
That just recently started. High Score Girl Dash, which takes place about like 10-ish years after the end of this, where it focuses on Hidaka as a middle school teacher. So I'm curious to see how like that's going to play out, because they've already like introduced a bunch of recurring characters from the original series into that.
That's really cool.
So I wonder exactly where that's going to go, and also like eventually if that'll ever get adapted as well, depending on how it does and everything. So curious to see how that plays out, especially because like obviously I think a lot of people would like to see what happened to Haro and Ono, because you don't really get much of a resolution post what happens at the very end.
No, you get a proposal at an airport
That's
with a plastic ring.
Yeah. So I'm sure like at some point those two will show up.
Yeah.
Like they would have to, I would imagine. So I think a lot of people would be very interested to see like where they are 10 years later.
Yeah.
So, and also I think it'd be interesting as well because like you said, this series in particular is very much a period piece of like when the arcade scene in Japan and in America and other places as well was very hot.
Yeah.
But if you take this in like 10 years later to like the late 2000s, not necessarily as hot anymore. Like it's all just like console stuff now. So like I want to see like how they bridge that and talk about that.
Well, and it would be interesting because she is also an adult now.
Mm-hmm.
And so like that would also have a different context for everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot that I would be curious about in reading this.
Yeah.
Or watching it if it ever comes out.
Yeah.
What a good series.
Mm-hmm.
I liked it a lot. Thanks for recommending it.
That's what I do.
It is what you do. You recommend the good stuff.
Sometimes.
99.9% of the time.
When is the 0.1% that I haven't?
I'm trying to think. There has to have been a time.
Probably. Like, I'm not going to deny that.
I don't know. It's probably something with Kojima. Gotta get my dig in.
Probably not wrong in that aspect.
Yep.
But yeah, that's going to do it for this episode.
Oh, you know what? It is Kojima because while the soundtrack is awesome, Snatcher sucks.
I mean, you didn't play it though. You just watched me play it. So that's like a halfway.
Okay.
Because I wasn't like, hey, you should play this.
No, you're right.
I knew very well that was not going to happen.
But the soundtrack is boss, though.
Exactly.
So at least, it wasn't a full point against you. It was only like
true.
A half point against you.
The full point is going to come when we eventually watch the wrestling anime.
I cannot believe. Cannot believe.
That's good. Like I said, that's going to do it for this episode. That is High Score Girl in a nutshell, or the second season of it at least. So if you like more from us, go to seasonlanguagecheckup.com or sac.cool, so where you can find past episodes of this podcast and other podcasts like Season Language Checkup and Jared and Al Watch. You can also find columns and reviews on the site as well. You can find more from Ann Ladium. Go to annladium.com. She's got columns and reviews. Follow us on Twitter, twitter.com/anime checkup. And you can support us on Patreon, patreon.com/SACOVA. Buy us a slice of pizza.
I love
Get
pizza.
access to unedited versions of the podcast and bonus episodes as well.
You get to hear me sneeze this episode that's going to be edited out.
Yeah. It's what everyone wants, clearly.
It's true. My weird sneeze.
Next week, we will be discussing insert thing we're discussing here next week.
Yeah, I don't know yet.
Exactly. We're going to talk about that.
Yay!